بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. والثاني وهو من لا تقتضي بدعته وتكفير أصلا، وقد اختلف أيضا في قبوله ورده، فقيل يرد مطلقا وهو بعيد، وأكثر ما علل به أن في الرواية عنه ترويجا لأمره وتنويها بذكره، وعلى هذا فينبغي ألا يروى عن مبتدع شيء يشارك في غير مبتدع. وقيل يقبل مطلقا إلا إن اعتقد حل الكذب كما تقدم، وقيل يقبل من لم يكن داعية إلى بدعته، لأن تزيين بدعته قد يحمله على تحريف الروايات وتسويتها على ما يقتضيه مذهبه، وهذا في الأصح. وأغرب ابن حبان في الاتفاق على قبول غير الداعية من غير تفصيل. نعم، الأكثر على قبول غير الداعية إلا أن يروي ما يقوي بدعته فيرد على المذهب المختار. وبه صرح الحافظ أبو إسحاق إبراهيم بن يعقوب الجوزجاني شيخ أبي داود والنسائي في كتابه معرفة الرجال، فقال في وصف الرواة: ومنهم زائغ عن الحق أي عن السنة صادق اللهجة، فليس فيه حيلة إلا أن يؤخذ من حديثه ما لا يكون منكرا إذا لم يقوي به بدعته. وما قاله متجه لأن العلة التي لها رد حديث الداعية واردة فيما إذا كان ظاهر المروي يوافق مذهب المبتدع ولو لم يكن داعية، والله أعلم. So we are discussing the issue of narrating from an innovator to present the ruling. Ibn Hajar rahmallah places innovators into two categories. The first are those who held beliefs which took them out of the fold of Islam. So they held beliefs which were mukaffira. So for this he presented three different views, that some would still accept the narration, others would reject it. A group would see whether the person that innovated regards it as permissible to lie. And thereafter Ibn Hajar rahmallah outlined his preferred view, that we will only reject the narration if the person innovates such beliefs which are contradictory and which are clearly in contrast to well-established beliefs, especially if the person has a good memory and is also honest and trustworthy. So all this was with regards to the first category, if the person holds beliefs which are very severe. Now moving on to the second category, Ibn Hajar rahmallah says, وَثَانِي وَهُوَ مَنْ لَا تَقْتَضِي بِدْعَةُ التَّكْفِيرَ أَصْلًا. That the second is are those innovators, they have slight beliefs, but those beliefs are not so severe. Although they are foreign to what is established from Quran and Ḥadīth, but they are not so severe to take the person out of the fold of Islam. So with regards to this, he again mentions that there are differences. وَقَدْ اخْتُلِفَ أَيْضًا فِي قَبُولِهِ وَرَدِّهِ. That just as there were differences on the first type, there are also differences on in this type here. So he says, فَقِيلَ يُرَدُّ مُطْلَقًا. So some scholars say that even if a person has slight innovations in his belief, then too his narrations will have to be discarded. We cannot trust him, we cannot accept his narrations. So سواء كان داعيا إلى بدعته أو لا، وسواء كان معتقدا حل الكذب لنصرة مقالته أم لا. So he's saying that irrespective whether he propagates his views or not, irrespective whether he regarded it as permissible to lie or not, in all circumstances we cannot accept his narration. So if you are rejecting the narration in this case too, so in the first case when it was mukaffir, then also you are rejecting the narration, and then you're also rejecting it in this case here when it's not mukaffir, then that typically means that the narration of an innovator will never be accepted. It will not be accepted in any circumstance. So the mas'ala then, according to these scholars, is that riwayatul mubtada'a marduda, that the narration of any innovator, any person who is from a different sect, who holds different beliefs, their narrations will be rejected. because you are not accepting it whether whether it's mukaffira or whether it's mufassiqa. So whether the innovation is severe or whether it is light, whether it takes a person out of the fold of Islam or takes him to the brink of kufr, or whether it is just a small issue, according to these scholars, it will never ever be permissible to narrate from a innovator. So Mullah al-Qari rahmallah mentions here that وَهَذَا الْقَوْلِ مَحْكِيٌ عَنْ مَالِكْ وَغَيْرِهِ, that this view is transmitted from Imam Malik rahimahullah, etc. and others. So Allama Khatib rahmallah attributed it to a group of earlier scholars. So not only Imam Malik, there were very earlier scholars who held this view. So he says, اختلف أهل العلم في سماع من أهل البدع والأهواء كالقدرية والخوارج والرافضة وفي احتجاج بما يروونه، فمنعت طائفة من السلف صحة ذلك، ولعلة أنهم كفار عند من ذهب إلى إكفار المتأولين وفساق عند من لم يحكم بكفر متأول. So he's saying that there were a group of scholars from the earlier times who rejected the narrations of a innovator in all circumstances. So the reasoning is that whether you have to take the view of those scholars in Aqidah who believe that if there is a possibility of ta'wil on the Aqidah, then you can accept them to be of the fold of Islam or not. So whether you're accepting that view or not, in both circumstances, you cannot accept their narrations. Because there are some who said that even if you can make ta'wil for them, then too we will regard them as kuffar. And we have explained that in last. So whether you can say that maybe they don't believe thus, etc., then too they will be considered as kuffar. So if they are kuffar, then you cannot accept the narrations from them. And even if you don't make takfir of them, then in a worst case scenario, they are fusaq. And we done previously that if a person is a fasiq, then you cannot accept his narration. So irrespective of which way you look at it, you cannot accept their narrations. And therefore, this group of scholars, they believe that it's never permissible to accept from an innovator. Likewise, Allama Sakhawi rahmallah said that لاتفاقهم على رد الفاسق بغير تأويل فيلحق به المتأول فليس ذلك بعذر. So in all circumstances. So then Allama Khatib rahmallah also mentioned that it's the view of Imam Malik rahimahullah. And strangely, Allama Amidi rahmallah, he attributed this to the majority. So Shaykh Wajuddin Gujarati, he mentions وَهَذَا الْقَوْلِ هُوَ الَّذِي نَقَلَهُ الْعَامِدِ عَنِ الْأَكْثَرِينَ. So you see, when we're doing Muqaddamah ibn Salah, then because Nukat of Imam Zarkashi is related to Muqaddamah ibn Salah, so therefore they we quoted it from Allama Zarkashi. And here, because this kitab is related to Nuzha an-Naḍar, so therefore we quote it here now from the commentary of Allama Wajuddin Gujarati. But it's not the view of the majority. Rather, there were this handful of scholars from the earlier times who held this view that if a person is an innovator, then you cannot accept any narrations from him. So Ibn Hajar rahmallah remarked on this here, and he says, وَهُوَ بَعِيد, that this here is far-fetched. It's a view which is really off. And he takes this expression from Allama ibn Salah rahmallah. You remember Allama ibn Salah, he said, وَهُوَ بَعِيدٌ مُبَاعِدٌ لِشَائِعِ أَنْ أَئِمَّةِ الْحَدِيثِ. So Mullah al-Qari, he passes a quick remark and he says that وَلَا يَبْعُدُ عَدَمُ اطِّلَاعِ الْمُحَدِّثِينَ. So there, Allama ibn Salah rahmallah, he mentions that فَإِنَّ كُتُبَهُمْ طَافِحَةٌ بالرواية عن المبتدع غير الدعاء وفي الصحيحين كثير من أحاديثهم في الشواهد والأصول. So he's saying that probably these scholars didn't know that those people were innovators. Had they known that they were innovators, then they would not have narrated from them. He's saying that it's not far-fetched to say that maybe the muhaddithin were unaware that this person holds contradictory views in Aqidah. And he says, وَهُمْ مَعْذُورُونَ فِي ذَلِكَ, that they will have a valid excuse. ذَلِكَ لِخِفَاءِ مَا فِي الْبَاطِنِ, because obviously a person holds his beliefs in his, he does not, it's not like public, the beliefs of a person, unless he clearly mentions his beliefs. It's something which is concealed in his heart. وَالْحُكْمُ بِالظَّاهِرِ مِنْ مُلَازَمَةِ التَّقْوَى. So then Ibn Hajar rahmallah now dismisses it and give the reason why it's ba'id. So he says, وَأَكْثَرُ مَا عُلِّلَ بِهِ أَنَّ فِي الرِّوَايَةِ عَنْهُ تَرْوِيجًا لِأَمْرِهِ. He's saying that at most, so the word is saying here, وَأَكْثَرُ مَا عُلِّلَ بِهِ. that most commonly, this is how you translate it first, that most commonly the reason which is given. So then an objection comes about that if you are translating it as most commonly, then there's only one view which is mentioned here. So he's not mentioning multiple views to say that from all the other views, this is the most quoted view. So وَاعْتُرِضَ عَلَيْهِ بِأَنَّ هَذَا دَلِيلٌ وَاحِدٌ فَمَا مَعَنَا كَثْرَتِهِ فَضْلًا عَنْ أَكْثَرِيَّتِهِ. Then you don't have to say that it's quoted, you can just say it's the only view that is mentioned. You don't have to say that it's more than other views, or you don't even have to say anything to denote upon how often it is mentioned. So then Mullah al-Qari gives the answer and he says, أُجِيبَ بِأَنَّ أَكْثَرِيَّتَهُمْ بِاعْتِبَارِ كَثْرَةِ الْمُسْتَدِلِّينَ. So you can say that most people give this here as the proof. That's the one way. Or you can say وَكَثْرَةِ اسْتِدْلَالِهِمْ, that most commonly this is the view which is given. That مَا عُلِّلَ بِهِ أَنَّ فِي الرِّوَايَةِ عَنْهُ تَرْوِيجًا لِأَمْرِهِ that by narrating from a person who is an innovator, you are now indirectly propagating his views and you are giving him a prominence. So this is the reason which they will say that you cannot narrate from a mubtadi'. But there are other reasons as well, and you can understand this here from the broad statements mentioned by earlier scholars. For example, in the introduction to Sahih Muslim, you know the famous incident of Muhammad ibn Sirin, that لم يكونوا يسألون عن الإسناد فلما وقعت الفتنة. So when he's talking about fitna, he's talking about all the different sects, because the different sects sprung and came out from the fitna at the end of the time of Uthman radiyallahu anhu, the Khawarij and all of this, they all came about because of the fitna. So when the fitna came about, then they said, سَمُّوا لَنَا رِجَالَكُمْ. Now tell us who your narrators are. فَيُنْظَرُ إِلَىٰ أَهْلِ السُّنَّةِ فَيُؤْخَذُ حَدِيثُهُم. Then he's saying that, so he's mentioning the common practice of that time, that they would only take from those who are from the Ahlul Sunnah, وَيُنْظَرُ إِلَىٰ أَهْلِ الْبِدْعَةِ فَلَا يُؤْخَذُ حَدِيثُهُم. And then they would look at those who hold all these innovated beliefs, and they would not take from them. Likewise, you can also take into consideration that statement of Muhammad ibn Sirin, that إِنَّ هَذَا الْعِلْمَ دِينٌ فَانْظُرُوا عَمَّنْ تَأْخُذُونَ دِينَكُمْ. In Kifaya is also quoted from so many others, that this ilm is your deen. So beware, you can't just go take your deen from any person. The person is an innovator. He doesn't even hold, his beliefs are not also in conformity with Quran and Hadith. So you cannot go and take Hadith from him. Likewise, they look at the fact that innovations were one of the primary reasons for people to fabricate. Like you remember under the chapter of Mawdu'at, we quoted from Ibn Lahi'a that he says, سمعت شيخا من الخوارج وهو يقول إن هذا الأحاديث دين فانظروا عمن تأخذون دينكم فإنا كنا إذا هوينا أمرا صيرناه حديثا. That one of the leaders of the Khawarij, or one of the elder people from the Khawarij, he now repented and he came back to the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, and thereafter he gave advice and he said that the same sentiments and the same statement of Muhammad ibn Sirin, he said that verily these are hadith are your deen. So beware and be vigilant on who you take your deen from. And thereafter he says that as a Khariji, when we wanted to invent anything, we would just make it into a hadith, and thereafter we would quote it, and that's how the practice would come about. So you can see how many different reasons there are that why these scholars would say that you should exercise extreme caution and rather not narrate from them. In fact, you have earlier scholars even painting all of them with the same brush. So, for example, Ali ibn Harb, he says, "Man qadara an yaktub al-hadith illa an sahib as-sunnah." He's saying that if you have the ability of only narrating from the Ahlul Sunnah, then narrate only from the Ahlul Sunnah. Why? He says, because others, innahum yakzibun, they would lie. Kullu sahib hawa, that he's saying that every person who innovated, yakzibu wa la yubali, they would lie. So any person who has different beliefs is definitely a liar, wa la yubali. So you can see he's just painting everyone with the same brush. So there are many different reasons like this where these scholars felt that you cannot just trust innovators. لأن مخالفته للقواطع يقتضي القطع بفسقه ودخوله في قوله تعالى إن جاءكم فاسق بنبأ فتبينوا. So this here is the one view. Now, in order to highlight the feebleness of this view, Ibn Hajar rahmallah says, وَعَلَى هَذَا فَيَنْبَغِي أَلَّا يَرْوَى مُبْتَرِعٍ شَيْئًا يُشَارِكُهُ فِيهِ غَيْرُهُ. He's saying that based on this here, it will be necessary that you cannot accept any narration from an innovator. So irrespective of whether it is also just to be used as a mutaba'a or as a shahid, it means they become totally worthless. And if you want to accept them as being totally worthless, then you cannot even accept them as mutaba'at and shawahid. So even if there is a Sunni or someone from the Ahlul Sunnah narrating it, then too, this person's, this innovator's narrations will have no value at all. So that means you are going to, because if you are going to say that it has some value, then it means that obviously it will be stronger than mawdu'. And therefore, you should be able to accept it. And if it is, if you are saying that it has no value at all, then it's even weaker than fabrications, and therefore you cannot accept it. But obviously this here cannot be the case. وَفِيهِ أَنَّ هَذَا قَدْ يَجُوزُ لِأَجَلِ التَّقْوِيَةِ. That definitely you should be able to at least accept the narrations of an innovator to strengthen another narration. كَمَا فِي التَّوَابِعُ وَالشَّوَاهِدِ. And then Mullah al-Qadi says, وَلَعَلَّ مَا وَقَعَ فِي الصَّحِيحَيْنِ وَغَيْرِهِمَا مِنْ هَذَا الْقَبِيلِ. Probably, so lucky he used the word probably because it's not really the case. He's saying probably that when you find, you remember the word la'alla, it comes from in Nahwa. So he's saying that probably the narrations which come in Sahihain from innovators, it's from this year that Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim narrated it just for support. But like we say that it's not the case. That leave alone just for mutaba'at. Al-Imam Munawi rahmallah mentioned that Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim actually use the narrations of innovators independently. He says that وَمِمَّا ضُعِفَ بِهِ أَيْضًا احتجاج. So you can see he's using the word احتجاج. Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim rahmallah very freely, without even bringing an alternate sanad, they would quote a hadith from innovators. So this is the first view of the second category of mufassiq, that even if the innovated beliefs of a person are not severe, then too the narration will be rejected. The second view is وَقِيلَ يُقْبَلُ مُطْلَقًا, that it's the total opposite, that you can accept it. But it only has that one clause which was mentioned in the previous section, إِلَّا إِنْ أَعْتَقَرَ حِلَّ الْكَذِبِ كَمَا تَقَدَّمَ. Yes, unless the person was of the view that it is permissible to lie. So if a person was not of the view that it is permissible to lie, then it's the total contrary to this first view. So that means in all circumstances, as long as the person was truthful, you could accept his narration. Because at the end of the day, he's still part of the ummah, and he's still part of the people of the qibla. So therefore, you can accept from him. So Mullah al-Qari rahmallah mentions the proponents of this view, and he says that وَعَزَّاهُ بَعْضُهُمْ إِلَى الْإِمَامِ الشَّافِعِي, that some have attributed this to Imam Shafi'i rahmallah, and we quoted all about this here in the lessons of Muqaddamah Ibn Salah, because Ibn Salah rahmallah also quoted it to Imam Shafi'i, that أقبل شهادة أهل الأهواء إلا الخطابية لأنهم يرون الشهادة بالزور. So he said that Imam Shafi'i rahmallah said that we will accept from all of those who are basically truthful. So we find that Imam Shafi'i rahmallah actually also practiced upon this year, that he accepted the narrations of Ibrahim ibn Abi Yahya in spite of Ibrahim ibn Abi Yahya being a Qadari. So then someone asked, praised in the main student of Imam Shafi'i rahmallah, Rabi', that فَمَا حَمَلَ الشَّافِعَ عَلَىٰ أَنْ رَوَى عَنْهُ, that everybody else is not accepting from Ibrahim ibn Abi Yahya. But like Alama Khalili rahmallah mentioned, that لا يروي عن إبراهيم من يزكيه إلا Shafi'i, that Imam Shafi'i is the only one who is narrating from him. So then Rabi' responded, and he says that basically he said that he was Ibrahim would not lie, that he's mentioned something, I can't remember the Arabic exactly, but if Ibrahim had to fall from a high place, لَا يَخِرَّ إِبْرَاهِيمٍ مِنْ بُعْدٍ أَحَبَّ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ يَكْذِبَ. If he had to fall from a high place, then it would be better from him than lying. وَكَانَ ثِقَةً فِي الْحَدِيثِ, or كما قال, that's what Imam Alama Sakhawi rahimahullah mentioned in Fath al-Mughith. So, here you can see that it's being attributed to Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah. Likewise, Alama Ibn Salah also attributed it to Imam Shafi'i. But then Alama Khatib rahimahullah also attributed this here to Imam Abu Yusuf rahimahullah from the Hanafi madhab. That he said that it's transmitted that this here is also anna hadha madhab ibn Abi Layla wa Sufyan al-Thawri wa ruwiya mithluhu an Abi Yusuf al-Qadi. So he said that this is also the view of Imam Sufyan al-Thawri, of Ibn Abi Layla, and also of Imam Abu Yusuf. Now the practice of Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim, because remember that Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim, they did not clearly mention their view that we will accept the narrations of a mubtadi'ah or we will not accept the narrations of a mubtadi'ah. So they did not mention their view. You have to study their practice, and from there you can deduce what their view was. So when we go through Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, so many different so many people from the bid'ah we find that they narrated from. So it's possible that this could be the reason that they also held the same view. So Mullah al-Qari quotes from Allama Suyuti rahmallah. He said that in al-mubtadi' in kafara fawazihun alla yuqbal. If his beliefs leads him out of the fold of Islam, then it's obvious you cannot accept. Why? Because he's a kafir. Wa illam yukaffar qubila. But if he does not become a kafir, then he's saying that you can accept it. And what's the reason he's giving? وَإِلَّا لَأَدَّى إِلَى رَدِّ كَثِيرٍ مِّنْ أَحَادِيثِ الْأَحْكَامِ مِمَّا رَوَاهُ الشِّيَعَةُ وَالْقَدَرِيَّةُ وَغَيْرِهِمْ وَفِي الصَّحِيحَيْنِ مِنْ رِوَايَتِهِمْ مَا لَا يُحْصَى وَلِأَنَّ بِدْعَتَهُمْ مَقْرُونَةٌ بِالتَّأْوِيلِ مَعَ مَا هُمْ عَلَيْهِ مِنَ الدِّيَانَةِ وَالصِّيَانَةِ وَالتَّحَرُّزِ عَنِ الْخِيَانَةِ. So you can see that he's mentioning that Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim rahmallah took this into consideration, that they had to be truthful, etc. And Allama Ibn Hajar rahmallah, Hafiz Ibn Hajar, in Fath al-Bari, how much time he dedicated to Sahih al-Bukhari. Yet, when talking about Imran al-Hattan, one of the deviants that Imam Bukhari rahmallah narrated from, then now trying to give an explanation on why Imam Bukhari rahmallah narrated from him. So like we're saying that the mutaba'ah, firstly the mutaba'ah is not even in Sahih al-Bukhari. So he's saying, Ibn Hajar is saying, وَإِنَّمَا أَخْرَجَ لَهُ الْبُخَارِيُّ عَلَى قَاعِدَتِهِ فِي تَخْرِيجِ أَحَادِيثِ الْمُبْتَدِعَةِ إِذَا كَانَ الصَّادِقَ اللَّهْجَةِ مُتَدَيِّنًا. So you can see it's exactly the same view like Imam Shafi'i rahmahullah. But Mullah al-Qari explains one slight problem which will arise here. He says, وَفِيهِ أَنَّهُ إِذَا اعْتَقَدَ حِلَّ الْكَذْبِ صَارَ كَافِرًا. That this here, adding this clause is like, it's a futile clause. It has no value. Because he regarded it as permissible to lie, he would have been out of the fold of Islam. The prohibition of lying is established in Quran and Ḥadīth. It's a major sin. So therefore, he would be a kafir. So, وَالْمَفْرُوضُ أَنَّ بِدْعَتَهُ لَيْسَ مِمَّا يَقْتَضِي الْكُفْرَ. So he just passed that comment. That there's no need to even mention this here. To mention. But we done under the chapter of Wudu, because you had that group who regarded it as permissible to lie, just to establish their belief. So that is why it's mentioned here, and there's a reason why it is mentioned. So that's the second view. And then the third view is وَقِيلَ يُقْبَلُ مَنْ لَمْ يَكُنْ دَاعِيَةً. It will be accepted, but as long as the person is not one who propagates his view. He doesn't call others towards his innovation. So here, da'iyah, it's a masculine, obviously. So وَالْهَاءُ لِلْمُبَالَغَةِ كَعَلَّامَةِ. So the ha which is put there, the ta marbuta, is because of mubalagha, to show that someone who propagates a lot, كَعَلَّامَةِ. بِخِلَافِ الدَّاعِيَةِ. So this here means that a person who propagates his views, his narrations will not be accepted. So he's saying that the third view, it will be accepted as long as a person does not propagate. Now what he mentions here is the ruling. So again, this mafhum mukhalafa according to Shafi'i. So he gives the reasoning on a different, for what is not being mentioned clearly. He's clearly mentioning about those who did not propagate. And thereafter he says, لأن تزيين بدعته قد يحمله. So you know this, the marja of this zamir, that تزيين بدعته, it goes to da'iyah, and the word da'iyah is not mentioned. What's mentioned here is man lam yakun da'iyah, and the reason which is being given is for a person who did propagate, but the person who propagated is not mentioned here in the text. So he says لأن تزيين بدعته قد يحمله على تحريف الروايات وتسويتها على ما يقتضيه مذهبه وهذا في الأصح. So although Ibn Hajar mentions this as a reason, like we say, that you have these different objections which come about here. Like besides that, is that you're saying that لأن تزيين بدعته قد يحمله, that maybe in order to beautify and make it seem as if his beliefs are very accurate, he will now fabricate and make up narrations just to support his views. So the first objection is that this reason does not fit with the claim. Because whether a person propagates or not, he could still be prompted to do this here. So maybe a person doesn't propagate his views, but maybe he just wants to support it. So maybe he tells his children at home, for example, he tells his students in the class that this is why we do it, and if he then indulges يحرف الروايات ويسويها. So the reason does not fit well with the claim. That's the first problem with this text. The second is that this here is not only confined to a person who done bid'ah. ثم في انطباق تعليلي على مفهوم العبارة نظر فإن مفهومها أن الداعية that a person who propagates his view ترد مطلقا والتعليل أخص منه فإنه أورد على ما له تعلق ببدعته فقط فيقتضي أن ما لا تعلق له بها فيقبل. That okay, if you're saying that maybe because of his bid'ah, it will prompt him to fabricate something which will strengthen his views. So then you could say, okay, let's narrate from him those things which have nothing to do with his bid'ah. So for example, if he has to narrate something on the fadail of, say, putting on the right first, or maybe on the fadail of walking to the masjid, or maybe on the prohibition of talking while adhan is going, or something like that, which has absolutely nothing to do with his bid'ah, then the reasoning which you gave does not mention why we cannot narrate from him. So that's the second problem with this text, and the third problem with this text is what we mentioned earlier. Allama Bukhari rahmallah actually said it, that لم يعلل المصنف منطوق قوله, that he didn't clearly say about da'iyah. He's speaking about man lam yakun da'iyah. And thereafter he's saying that إنه لمحظور في روايته لعدم خوف من أن يحرف الحديث إلى بدعته. So here you must understand why you can accept from someone who does not propagate by understanding the opposite of لأن تزيين بدعته. So those are the three problems with this sentence of Ibn Hajar rahmallah. But now the second objection which we're saying, that what if he narrates something which does not support his bid'ah? Now imagine taking it a step further. What if he narrates something which clearly contradicts his beliefs? So then all the more reason it should be accepted. And hence Kamal ibn Abi Sharif, he says that when he was reading this here to Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, then Ibn Hajar rahimahullah told them, so he told them in a dars, that inna riwayat ad-da'iya ma yaruddu bid'atahu ka riwayat ad-da'iya ma la yaqawwi bid'atahu. That the narrations of a innovator, if he narrates those which clearly contradicts his beliefs, then they will be accepted, just like how we will accept the narrations of someone who does not propagate his views. So Ibn Hajar rahmallah then mentions that وَهَذَا فِي الْأَصَحْ, that this here is the more correct view from all the previous views which he mentioned. And Allama Ibn Salah rahmallah, you remember he attributed this here to the majority. He said هذا مذهب الكثير أو الأكثر من العلماء. And at the end he also said وهذا المذهب الثالث عدلها وأولاها. And likewise, Allama Khatib rahmallah, he also attributed it to a lot. He said, وَقَالَ كَثِيرٌ مِنَ الْعُلَمَاءِ. And Mullah al-Qari rahmallah, he mentions from Allama Jazari rahimahullah, that وَهَذَا الْمَذْهَبْ عَلَيْهِ الْأَكْثَرُ وَهُوَ الْمُخْتَارُ. So being the view of the majority, it's also the view of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. Now I was hoping to conclude this chapter, but I'm actually currently, while this dars is going on, there's a barbecue which is going on, a braai which is going on. But in order to teach this dars, I couldn't as yet go. So I think now I need to rush for that barbecue. So inshallah we'll continue with it on Thursday, inshallah. Until then, jazakumullah khairan.